sometimes you're building and you're trying to prove something. And then you layer in all these experiences. Laird and I talk about how much kind of experience we have. So you layer in all of this work and experience. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a second. I don't need to sell it. I don't need to force it. I don't need to prove it. I can just be. And if somebody feels that this is useful, I'm ready to go.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis podcast with Chip Conley, where we explore how midlife isn't a crisis, but a chrysalis, a time of profound transformation that can lead to the most meaningful chapter of your life.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis, and I'm Chip Conley. And this week we have a couple, Gabby Reece and Laird Hamilton, very famous performance athletes. She was famous as a volleyball star. Laird still rides big waves at 61. They don't just ride waves, they create them. She's a legend of strength and grace. He's a surfing icon with a wild streak. And together they make midlife look like the ultimate adventure sport. I think you're going to enjoy this. Whether you're an adventure sport person or not, I think you'll appreciate the relationship, what they learn from each other, as well as their relationship with aging, which they've thought quite a bit about. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome, Gabby and Laird, to the Midlife Chrysalis. We're honored to have you.
Hi, Chip. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're honored to be here.
So I know that, Gabby, you spent a lot of your youth in the Virgin Islands, maybe St. Thomas. Is that correct? And Laird, you were born in San Francisco, but grew up, on the North Shore of Oahu. So you both sort of were beach kids on some level. What was your upbringing like? And then take us forward to 30 years ago when you met on the set of The Extremists, because I've read some fun stuff about that.
Well, I mean, my upbringing was obviously on the beach in Hawaii, on an island, on islands in the village, in a small village, and kind of a little more, I'd say, primal. Like I lived in a house that had been moved twice by tidal waves. We had an outhouse and a cold shower, screen windows. If it rained really hard, you couldn't. The little TV that we had with the rabbit ears with the aluminum foil, you couldn't hear it. The rain would drown out the sound on the roof, and I spent a lot of time. I mean, there was rivers and beaches, and I spent a lot of the time in the jungle and just kind of growing up with native people that were still kind of living off the land, and kind of it was the end of that era. So I kind of, I had that, and then I was a young boy or person around a lot of adults, around a lot of men, and in the 60s, and so I think I got to watch a lot of bad behavior, maybe, which led me to probably be more conservative in a way, I guess. I don't know the side effect of that
Are you talking about smoking
occurrence.
pot? Is that what you're talking about? What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, well, just whatever was happening in the 60s. I think it was just a little more irresponsible kind of lifestyle. I mean, I would say irresponsible because I'm kind of linear in that way, I guess. But yeah, just I think more carefree, kind of, live to surf, and maybe work, maybe not work, have a family, maybe not have a family, that kind of stuff. Just no. I mean, I had an incredible mother, so I always say my mom raised 2 sons and a few men. So she, I think I had a really powerful influence that way, especially for the imagination, and I just grew up fixing things, learning how to fix things, kind of learn how to do everything. My daughters always say, "Hey, like, how do you know how to do this?" I go, "Well, that's just when you're where we lived and what we did, you just had to have some skill in every field. You had to be able to do everything. Maybe not great, but well enough to get by."
Mhm. Gabby?
Mine was different and very similar. I think if you're on an island in the 60s or in my case, the 70s, my father actually is from Trinidad. So I understood why he was in Trinidad, but why are your parents in the Caribbean? And so a lot of times it was like the parents were sort of getting away. A lot of times they had us quite young. And so you were sort of growing up maybe with them as well. And I didn't always live with my mother, and then I sort of moved back in with her when I was 7 in the Caribbean. But you're in nature. There's not a lot of kind of traditional rules. You know, it's not getting beat into you that you're supposed to grow up and do this thing or follow this line. So you grow up in the wild more. You're in nature. You're in the ocean. My mother even trained dolphins. Like there's some like, really funny eccentricities there. And then also being together with everybody, and everybody different, every different age, every different culture, you're together. And so I think your sort of relationship with that interaction with people and different cultures is pretty fluid. And so I think I grew up not quite as wild as Laird, where Laird grew up was pretty primitive and like primal and fishing and hunting and, doing. And also even Laird being a male and me being a female, but certainly the island I was on was more populated. And so by the time I left the Caribbean, I was a junior in high school, and I had put all my kind of mostly all my yee-yaw behavior, the radical behavior was I was almost through it by the time I left. So you mentioned meeting Laird 30 years ago, and it's actually in November this year will be 30 years. By the time I met Laird at 25, I was a professional athlete. I was really disciplined, and alcohol is not a part of my life, and like just kind of all these very sort of strict grown up things. I was doing a TV show and interviewing athletes, and I had done a lot of shows, maybe 60. I'd done MTV Sports and then The Extremists. I was interviewing mostly male athletes that were doing sort of these alternative sports, this is when they were percolating. And I was going to Hawaii to do a series of shows like Robbie Nash windsurfing and hang gliding and skydiving. And I was going to interview some surfer that was part of a group of 8 guys that were doing this new type of surfing called tow surfing, and my guest was a guy named Laird Hamilton. And you got information through a fax machine because I would try to do my homework. And there was this big hoopla about this Laird Hamilton guy, and I had Laird within surfing was known, but outside of surfing, not particularly. And I had interviewed some big athletes, and somehow the hoopla around me interviewing Laird prior to going was so interesting. People were like, "Oh, Laird Hamilton. Oh, da da." And I was like, "Okay." And yeah, so obviously that interview changed our lives. We lived together, I think 8 days later.
Wow. Wow.
Well, we lived in different places. It was very complicated. And at 25, I was certainly not looking for my life's partner,
Mm.
but I met Laird, and I thought, "Oh, this is a very unique person." And then it went from there.
Yeah, well, and I was on Maui surfing, and we were focused on trying to ride giant waves. Had developed a technique to ride the biggest waves, that maybe have ever been ridden, and so that was our focus. We were in the ocean, we were focused on that, and, I was gonna do an interview, and I was like, "Oh, what bimbo are they sending me now?" Like, like, I knew the guy that was running the production company, and he was called me and said, "Hey, we have this show, we'd love to have you as a guest," and I was kinda like, "Ah, yeah, okay, whatever." And, that's how I kinda came into the situation. Like Gabby said, things were complicated at the time, and I was definitely the last thing on my mind was, a woman, attractive woman, and, that was not something that was even, I think it snuck up on me on a way that was kind of out of my control. I don't think I had any say in it. It was kinda like, "This is what's happening." And, I always say it was love and infatuation after first conversation. It wasn't really like I saw her and I went, "Wow, that's," I was not that was not I didn't have that lens on anyway, and I was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And then once once I once I experienced her mind, you know, that that kinda took care of that.
Wow. But I mean, she's a hottie though too. I mean, let's be honest. And Gabby, was it sort of like love at first sight, or was this
No, I mean, listen,
She's not
I
that kinda girl.
no, and I'm not like, and plus I had been in the fashion business, so I'd worked with like incredibly, whatever, handsome men. And I think, and this is maybe, Laird and I have a lot of common values, And I think we operate, even if we weren't together, a certain way. And similarly, how we get there is different. And one of them wouldn't be, I could appreciate like a handsome person or a beautiful girl, but I wouldn't see a guy and be like, oh, I'd have to see something about you that would make me go, "Oh, that's interesting." So, and I did think that when I interviewed Laird, I go, "Oh, this is a very unique, very focused," and also I could feel Laird's genuineness. Like, Laird is not capable of being any other way than how he is.
The fact that you both of you were athletes and you had been successful and were continuing to be successful. In fact, Gabby, you didn't even start playing volleyball until you were in high school, right?
Yeah, I didn't really pick up. I had dibble dabbled, and then it was my junior year when I moved to Florida that I got pretty serious about, volleyball and basketball. Yeah.
Do you think that the fact that you both were athletes and, very well regarded in your own field, I mean, was that a positive, negative, or did you feel a sense of bonding because of that? And clearly, we're going to talk further about how you've bonded around performance sports. But back in the early days, was that a positive or a negative?
I think it's both. I think I think there was it makes it easier and more complicated. So easier in that you have a great understanding and respect for pursuit and a passion for something. So it's not like, Laird's going to say to me, "Why do you need to practice?" And I'm going to say, "Why do you need to go to that swell?" But then the conflict is like, how do you make your lives together work when you're in a deep pursuit personally, and the kind of the give and the take of that. It is that part has just a little more tension around it, where it's like you're trying to be so focused and yet you're trying to consider a whole, another person.
Well, and I think also that, because you have a focus and you're on a mission, you can also recognize that and appreciate that in somebody else and be supportive too. So I think we did have the ability and have had the ability to be highly supportive of one another. And it's like my desires and my needs in this area isn't taking away from you. It's not like it takes away from you. And I think in another type of relationship where the person didn't understand, they'd think every time you were trying to do your thing that it was somehow taking away from them. And so we never had that part of it. I mean, when I met Gabby, my kind of notoriety was a lot less I would just say than her, but this also it wasn't nearly as high as it eventually has, became and has become. And so what I was doing wasn't completely appreciated and respected at the time. So I was dealing with that. And Gabby looked at me, I think, like, hey, I can give you a hand. I can help you out because, I see it. I mean, that's at least what she's expressed to me. She saw it and was like, "Hey, you just need a little guidance and a little help," because I was just focused on specifically, what I was doing and not necessarily figuring out how to maybe capitalize from it in some way, at least to make it worth the value of the time it was taking.
Mhm. And Chip, I recognized early that Laird was actually much better at his sport than I was at mine. I knew that. I knew the difference. I'd been around a lot of
Mm.
athletes, and so the other part of that was, like, me really appreciating somebody who was really good at what they do.
If you're enjoying the conversations we've been having on the Midlife Chrysalis, I have a valuable offer for you to consider. My book, Learning to Love Midlife 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, is a national bestseller. And right now, you can get a copy for just the cost of shipping. It offers stories, research, and practices to help you move from a midlife crisis to a midlife catalyst and see this stage of life not as a decline, but an opportunity to flourish. Claim your copy today at meawisdom.com/midlife book. And what was the kind of advice or guidance that you gave Laird at that time that helped propel him to even more fame?
Well, first of all, let's talk about timing. Second of all, I had done a little bit of that side hustle for my own sport because when you're in a lifestyle sport, nobody cares. So you kind of have to do the song and dance. So I had already been down that path.
Yeah, I was a water polo
Do you
player.
know?
I was a water polo player,
Yeah,
and I totally get it. Played water polo at Stanford,
yeah.
I'm with you. People are like, "Oh, it must be so hard." And what are the rules again? And
Water polo is like one of the hardest sports there is. It's so brutal.
it is. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So I think and I was fortunate we were working with a manager that had helped me sort of tell my story outside of my sport, and with Laird, it was even a little more different because it was like, well, you have the element of the ocean, which is so romantic and captivating and dangerous, so great for storytelling, but also you're out in the middle of the ocean, so how can people observe it? So it was really and Laird just also he happens to be a good communicator. So there was a lot of things in his favor and the timing, and then working with this woman, Janie, and it was the right time, and it was just sort of getting behind Laird and encouraging him. Because if it's up to Laird, Laird would rather dig a hole or go surfing, and you go, "Hey, listen, this one little interview or this series of interviews really is going to provide you with more freedom and runway to do what you wanna do."
Well, we are lucky to have him here today. Um, thank you. So, what's been your relationship with your body as you've gotten older? So let's move forward. Both of you are officially in midlife. I define midlife as 35 to 75, so you still got a while to be there. Laird, you're in your early 60s. And Gabby, you're mid 50s, I guess. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
So, what's your relationship with your body been as you've gotten older? And what kind of advice or wisdom might you give our listeners and viewers about how we continue to see our body as a rental vehicle we're supposed to take care of?
That's a great way to say it, I'll let Laird because, the difference too with us is Laird is still in deep pursuit. So what he needs and requires of his body also, it's like if I'm a little half cocked, it's kind of okay. I'm not going to get into big trouble. I can just pull back on my training. So I'll let you answer first because you're in a different realm, and then I'll give you mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, somebody asked me, about being 100%. I said I wasn't 100% since I came into the world and took a breath of the air here, so I think it's always you're dealing with what you have, how you're feeling and learn how to be good at that. I've been hurt a lot in my career. I've had a lot of injuries. I have at this point, I have an accumulation of a lot of repetitive motion and other things that have led to, I got 2 titanium hips and I've had thousands of stitches and, I've had a lot of damage in the years and you're always trying to mitigate that. You get better at it, you realize it's temporary. You kinda go through the mental thing of, "Can I will I be able to do it again?" and all that psychology, but once you've been through that cycle, you kinda get good at recovering, you get good at dealing with being hurt, and that's just part of life. I think part for me, I feel like I just look at it like this is what I where I'm at right now, and then how can I still perform and accomplish what I wanna accomplish, and if I have to go to bed a little earlier or, you know, do some other therapies to, help me eat better, take supplementation, do all the little things that support the big picture, then I do that, and I'm diligent about that aspect of it. I try to have my training not hurt me and get injured from my training because that's always bad when you get an injury from training. It's like it's supposed to be supportive and not destructive, but so the training has evolved, prioritize certain things more than you would have in the past. It's not always about grinding yourself down and because I have that mentality too, where it's just like, hey, if you're not, if you can suffer without damaging, there's difference between damage suffering and other suffering. So I think just having that relationship, getting a better relationship with being injured, getting a better relationship with performing injured, just all those things and and then being honest about it too, like, "Hey, you're hurt, you're not gonna be able to," and being okay with that too, because it's only temporary. All of those things, I think there's so much psychology that goes around it. I think as you get older, you've been through so many different phases of it, you get kind of better at the process, and, I always say what I lack in youthful enthusiasm, I try to make up for with some kind of experience and wisdom, you know?
And as I think for me and, I'm gonna throw this out there and say it sometimes as a female, you even have these other extra layers because of like youth and beauty and all these things, right? So I think perspective, I always start with my perspective first, which is the opportunity to be as healthy as I am is a real gift. And also I don't hang around a lot of people that do the whole like I can't do that because I'm 40 now or I'm 50 and I'm like okay, like you got to go. So I think it's me being in charge of my own uh perspective about how fortunate I am, the grace of another day of being this age, spending time with people that they're just still dreaming and they're in pursuit and they're going to do the work. They're not going to talk about what they want their body to do. They actually have a strategy and a plan and a practice that they're showing up every day and every week to get that done. Because a lot of people, mostly it's lip service. Oh, I'm getting like this, but they're not doing anything different. So, I have a really good practice in place that supports me, and I actually even think certain things diminish, but then you still have an opportunity to always be better. Like, it's like looking for those small little windows of growth and improvement, and it and again, being reminded that not everybody gets to be 55 or 61, like, that we're so fortunate, and I'll do what it takes to feel good, to be strong, and that takes often a lot of hard work and to be thoughtful. So, it's also, like, not bullshitting yourself.
Yeah, and we set our life up to be, accountability. Gabby has, 3 days a week. She has a group that comes and trains and does her training, and then we have another thing, another 3 days a week. So 6 days a week, we have people coming around to work out with. So on a day where you go, "You know what? Today I'm pretty bust up. I don't feel like doing anything." You got people outside going, "Okay, you guys ready to go?" Kinda thing. So it kind of, you set it up to kind of not have a way out in a way.
Yeah.
Like, you just set that thing out, and Gabby, has been a proponent of it, but I surround myself with a lot of younger guys that are hungry, that are strong, that are striving, and they're still on their in not that I'm not in my pursuit, but they're still early in the early stages of their pursuit, and so I feed off of that too. Like if I just hung out with a bunch of 61-year-old guys, that I'd probably go sit down on the couch instead of some young, hungry animals that wanna grind away at it. I'm like, "Okay, cool," and, you gotta be okay with, "Hey, I'm not 21, and that guy's 21, and he's doesn't have a sore part on him." His testosterone's coming out his ears, but I'm like, "That's cool, but I'm okay with that." I'm not gonna use him as a comparison to me because he also doesn't have all of the experiences and all the things that I've been through and has all these other things to deal with, and I'll take my things over his things. Give me a few sore body parts over the life lessons that
Starting over.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you do a lot of performance training with people, and breath work is part of it. So, do you want to talk a little bit about what the sequencing you see around breath work being sort of a foundational part of training, and how you came to that reckoning or that resolution?
Well, Laird I watched Laird do a 45-minute or 50-minute breath work today. I'm like,
Yeah, the isolation, but I mean, any
And explain so people know. Explain what people to people what does that mean? What does 45, 50 minutes of breath work mean? What are you doing when you're doing that?
well, there's a sequencing of breathing that you do, so there's some it depends on what you're looking for out of it. Right now, this lately, my focus has been around kind of at least 3 long inhale breath holds, and so in order to do that, we go into, like, a pattern, so we'll do a 3 or 4-minute pattern to build us up into either an exhale breath hold or an inhale breath hold, and we'll hold that for a long period of time. And so we have a sequence of patterns that we go into before we go into these long holds, and then we go into these long holds and hold them as long as you can, but or somewhere there you can always hold longer, but we go into one where you're really getting squeezed, and then we recover and go back through that and do those multiple times through. And that isolation of the breathing really does improve the system, right? Because normally we're breathing around activity, and there's a meditative aspect to it. There's a presence. most meditation and most things are based around. I mean, breath work is everywhere and everything. If you think about Om and Amen and all these sounds that we use in conjunction with breath. I mean, I think anybody that deals with the water, both Gabby and I grew up swimming, her mom trained dolphins, she was in the ocean. Air and the importance of air is relevant. It's a relevant thing because you're like, there's air above and there's no air below. So your relationship, and being a water polo player, it's all about the air. It's all about, and if your head's out, that's cool. But when you're under, there's no, and so I think that was the foundation. I think I was led to it. There was rock stone running when I was a kid that the Hawaiians would do, ride a stone, hold a stone, jump off a boat, go to the bottom, and then run along the bottom. You get a longer downtime. So I was already around things like that within breathing. And then the Iceman, Wim Hof, who I know is a friend of mine, he kind of popularized a form of Tumo breath work. I mean, then there's apnea from free diving. I grew up around free diving and free divers, and there's all that breath work. So there's so many different modalities. But when you look at, in a prioritization of elements for survival, I always tell people, I go, you can go weeks without eating, you can go days without drinking, but you can only go minutes without breathing. And so as far as the importance of what it is, it's free, you have it, you own it. And a lot of our health issues stem from our lack of ability to breathe correctly. And so it just seems like something to give. Again, as you go, you kind of prioritize, because sometimes I don't think we believe that a certain type of training is important enough if it's just not, hey, I'm banging iron, I'm lifting something, I'm running 30 miles, it's all this grind, 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 and we don't prioritize the simplicity of something like, hey, we're going to just sit here or lay here and we're going to breathe for 30 or 40 minutes. And we can make this breathing as difficult as any exercise you've ever done, maybe harder. Like we can make it impossible. But putting that kind of perspective on it and then doing it on a regular basis, you really get the benefits from it, and you see it, you can feel it in your overall performance, in your health and everything.
If somebody wanted to learn more about breath work, or should they just go to YouTube and just check out some videos, or do you have is there somebody who you particularly recommend, or maybe even your videos?
Well, there's some great books actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Patrick McCune has written some great The Oxygen Advantage, because it's also he shares with you your understanding of your relationship with CO2 and how
And then breathe. I think
and
correct.
Breathe. James Nestor's book is really great. And like Wim is fun to follow along with, but if you want to get sciencey, I like Patrick McCune for that. Because he talks about even high level athletes don't have something called a Bolt score, that's very good, very high.
Your CO2 tolerance.
Your CO2 tolerance. So if you can get a high CO2 tolerance, there's some great things. And what I always loved is if you're sitting at your desk, unless you're sprinting, pretty much you should be breathing in and out through your nose, right? And and most people are doing 15 to 22 breaths per minute when we should be doing 5 to 7, and just slow it way down.
What kind of path are you carving through midlife? Our free Midlife Pathfinder quiz helps you discover which of 8 archetypes best describe your approach to this stage of life and what that means for your next chapter. It only takes a few minutes and your results may surprise you. Find out your archetype now. It's quick, it's fun, and it might help you see your journey in a whole new light. Take the Pathfinder quiz at meawisdom.com/quiz. There's some correlation to longevity on
Yes.
this, including the species that tend to live longer are having less breaths per
Yeah,
minute, if I'm not
right.
mistaken.
Yeah, well, and less heartbeats.
Yeah.
Yeah, less heartbeats, and
Slower
Yeah.
heart rates, like
Yeah.
like slower breathing rhythms.
your overall health will be better, your mood, you'll be downregulated, you'll be in your parasympathetic, you won't be revved up all day long into your sympathetic system.
Mhm.
So I think To
You can
Laird's
really control. Yeah.
Yeah, to Laird's point, we don't really give it the value. I have to remind myself all the time just because I know, and I put that in quotes, doesn't mean I'm so great at always practicing it. So
But
it's
when you
really important.
Yeah, and when you bring consciousness to your breathing, when you bring a like an awareness like, "Hey, I'm gonna nose breathe right now, and I'm gonna be aware of my breath and the length of time I'm inhaling and exhaling." That's why some of the education, that's why those books are good because it helps you understand the breathing, which then gets you further committed into doing it because then you're just not like, hey, what's this breathing thing? And what do you mean CO2 and this and that? So you when you learn about it and you understand the way the system works, then you're more vested. And then you're like, okay, that's where the value, that's where I prioritize because I understand, what it does. And then you can build from there. But
Yeah.
breathing is
You can
everything.
ramp up, ramp
Yeah.
down, like, you
Yeah.
can use it, like,
Yeah, I mean,
"Let's go,"
if you know what the haka is, people don't realize they talk about the haka being intimidation thing, but it's actually a pre-battle preparation pattern. So they're preparing for battle.
Is that from the
The Maori.
The
Yeah,
Maoris?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh my god, those guys, they're
yeah,
fierce.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean,
Well,
just
I talk about the lion. When the lion roars, when you hear a lion
yeah.
roar, you can tell by the roar, like, the power. And so you hear the lion roar and everybody goes, we better pay attention because this is powerful, right? And so in a way, I think that so many things in so many cultures, the spirit and breath are connected. That's why when you do extensive breath work, you can have kind of meditative or even transformational experiences. We get people going through these breathing patterns and they get like they have emotional releases. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that comes from it. And so I think again, important.
We could spend the whole hour on this one.
Exactly.
Let's move on to this idea of a midlife crisis or chrysalis. The way we tend to historically, or at least since 1965, when the term was popularized, we sort of see midlife as this time where, oh, our body's falling apart and I'm bored. I've been doing the same old thing and I'm disappointed in my life because, I haven't accomplished this or that, or for some people they have kids and it's like they're doing sandwich generation, taking care of their parents and their kids at the same time. Did you have a midlife chrysalis? Did you have a time where in your 40s or 50s you've had a reckoning, a challenge that forced you to reevaluate your life? And how did you get to the other side of it? Because part of the reason I call it a chrysalis is because the U curve of happiness research shows that, frankly, after 50, we get happier with each decade after having a low point around 45 to 52. So tell us about your midlife chrysalis, if you had one.
Weirdly, I think I had mine very young. I gotta be honest. I had mine at 30. And what that was me having to come to terms with the way I was doing things in the long run was not gonna work for the life I was living. So I was already married to Laird. I was probably emotionally scared to be vulnerable. Because of the way I grew up, I just was very self-contained. And so I had that early, which and then coming out of it and committing to doing things that were uncomfortable and different, which really just meant communicating more, saying what I wanted, needed, felt, instead of being stoic and silent about everything. And understanding that when you're gonna love someone and you're gonna build a family, that it is scary. Like, loving is risking and it's tied into the thought about loss. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, but that's living." And so I had that early, and so that really helped me kind of have a nice glide, after 35 into where I have been for the last 20 years. And I will say this, I do remember 50 being somehow easier, even though I didn't freak out too much, but still easier than 40. Something about 40 was like, "Oh, wow, this is like game on now. Tick tock, like time's rolling." And 50 was like, you'd already had to really have lessons. And the notion of surrender really came into my life at probably about 46 or 7, where it was like, if you don't get a relationship with surrendering and being okay with not knowing. And, Byron Katie was helpful for me. in some of this, like the notion of past futuring and worrying about shit that hadn't happened and all this stuff. So that was sort of my process, different than Laird. I think Laird had a monumental shift in his 40s.
Did I?
I think so, if I recall.
I was gonna say I probably have one every week, you know? I think mine's like slow drip. I have one and then I come out of it and then I have another one, and I mean, there's a couple things that obviously when I used to drink, I like drinking. I love a glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine, a bottle of wine, 2 bottles of wine, like, I'm a professional, and, obviously, I think that was not it's a depressant, and that was probably a big shift for me to when I stopped drinking. That was I think I continued to drink, I don't think Gabby and I would probably have made it, and, but I will say that I think that both her and I are have been fortunate because the way my athletic career has gone, I was never in a thing where it was like, "Okay, I was a pro, I was a champion, and now I'm done and I don't do it anymore." And so I think I don't have that part on my career side. Like, I don't have that kind of thing when I lost that. I mean, Gabby has never she's still a woman and she has her vanity, but she didn't rely on her beauty in her life. Like, it was her athleticism, her intelligence, these other things, and those things, you don't lose those if you're just relying on your beauty, and then all of a sudden you're getting a little older, like, "Oh, I'm not quite as beautiful as I was when I was 20." And so we have some of those things that have helped us along. I continue to have a pursuit. I think one thing that's helped me is that my goalpost always moves when I get close. So right when I get close to a field goal or whatever, it just shifts a little bit, and then I'm kind of always in pursuit. I mean, I think the ocean has allowed me to do it. I think reinventing myself in the sense of kind of looking at new disciplines and shifting what I'm doing to continue to pursue has helped as well. I think the obviously the drinking and our relationship and me as a person, that was a monumental shift. I think that was a moment and it was leading up to it. And maybe, part of it was, dealing with maybe I had set up a goal and I'd achieved it and it didn't bring me what I thought it was gonna, like I thought, oh, I'm gonna just do this and that's gonna be it. And then I did it and I was like, wow, really didn't work. I mean, you see people do that all the time. They set it up like if I just, have $1 billion, it's all gonna be good, and then they get $1 billion, and they're like, "Oh my god, I gave up everything to get $1 billion, and then I'm still in the same spot I was. In fact, it's worse because I did all the things I neglected all this other areas." So, I think it's a combination of all of those
And
things.
and Chip, thinking about you and your philosophy, I think one thing Laird and I have done, maybe because we did grow up on islands and it was the way we raised, our house has always been a place for people to get what they need if we could offer it. We've always had a sense of community and service even when we were younger, but I think as you get older, you become even better at that and more capable of being of service to your community. And I think that that has been a nice tipping of the scales. And then, having daughters and learning from them. And Laird always says a quote that he heard, they don't know if they said it was maybe a guy in the military, "Never let your accomplishments be
Yeah,
greater than your dreams."
yeah,
And both Laird and I are sort of like, "Well, what else could we do?" And not so attached to the past.
yeah. And being culturally, Hawaii, aloha is the generosity, the giving, the sharing. I mean, that's just what we do there. We've done that, so that's been very natural for us. So mentoring is part of that, like bringing in because I've been mentored for, and it's like pass it on. And that's why we always share things we learn. Like, and normally, like a lot of times as an athlete, you get this thing that gives you an advantage, and you keep it a secret because you want to have an advantage over your opponent. And I think for me, I never felt that way. I never felt like, "Oh, I need this thing." I'll be like, "Hey, you want my board? You want my training? You want my food? You want everything except my girl. You can have everything." But, you know, and if you can do it better than me, congratulations kind of thing. And so I think that's more of our approach as a person, but as a couple.
There's a woman named Becca Levy who at Yale who is a big fan of the Modern Elder Academy MEA, and in her work, she's shown that when you shift your mindset on aging in midlife from a negative to a positive, so you actually see aging as there's an upside to aging, unexpected pleasures of aging, that you gain 7.5 years of additional longevity. So I want to ask both of you, what's gotten better with age in your life?
I mean, for me personally, I don't have to be as hyper vigilant. I don't worry as much because I learned how ineffective that is, and I've let a lot of that go. And also, sometimes you're building and you're trying to prove something, and then you layer in all these experiences. Like, Laird and I talk about how much kind of experience we have. So you layer in all of this work and experience, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a second, I don't need to sell it. I don't need to force it. I don't need to prove it. I can just be. And if somebody feels that this is useful, I'm ready to go. And so there's something really enjoyable about becoming more masterful about certain things, but not feeling like I got to show everybody how smart I am or how capable I am or how hard I'm willing to work, because your body of evidence, your body of work, it's kind of there. And so that part is really beautiful, and also, listen, watching my family grow, like, we were walking behind 2 of our daughters in New York the other day, and these are formidable young women. I'm like, "This is really badass. Like, look at these girls," It's so cool, and just always having the space and the wherewithal to really appreciate all the small things, to notice, just to keep noticing.
I feel like the control of your contentment, right? That you really can control it.
Mm,
Like it's not we are so kind of programmed to believe that you have to be told that you're good and you have to
mm,
everything's being dictated by, the outside parties, and they really don't care about you at the end of the day. And once you get to the point where you're like, "Oh no, I'm what I'm doing is good and I feel good and I'm doing the right thing and I'm, all these things," but you take control of it yourself personally. You're just set free at that point. You just have a freedom. I think that you never believed you could have given the other frame of mind, right? The other frame of mind, which is I'm relying on people to tell me how I did and how I look and how and what success is and what failure and all that stuff. And I think so having that and I mean the ocean teaches you patience, but I think it's a learned skill. And I think you can get better at being patient and being and then ultimately I think it's the having the faith, having the faith to believe that it's gonna be okay. I mean, maybe there's some submission in that you're okay to that you're gonna go too, right? I think that that's a big piece of it. I think death always plays a factor in everything, and I think when you're young, you think it's never gonna happen. It's so far away, and then you get older, and then you get older, and then you're like, "Wow, now I'm getting near the finish line." And whether the finish line is, 30 years more or whatever, but you're not 20, you're 60 or you're 70. And so I think that there's something about being okay with that. I think you have to be okay with that. I think you have to be ready to if you're not okay with that, that's gonna make for me personally, I feel like that's gonna make a pretty tense thing as it nears and you're not okay with it. So you have an opportunity to get everything in aligned, you know?
You're doing big wave surfing. So I mean there is a death-defying nature to the sport you've chosen. So my guess is that you've had to maybe when you're younger, it was like, "Oh, that's never gonna happen." But as you've gotten older, do you see the danger attached to it and does it not scare you? How do you feel about riding 60-foot waves?
I think you'd be ignorant not to have not to have the respect that, hey, you can I think it has definitely developed a relationship with death that a lot of people never have. So I think at a certain point, because I've had so many opportunities to be exposed to the edge. I have a relationship with it, and so I'm like people talk, "Oh, I'm gonna live to 150." I'm like, "150 years of this stuff? I think I'm okay." Like, I don't need to do that. Like, I want the quality till I'm done, but I also am realistic about we're all gonna die, and so we have to be okay with dying. Are you okay with dying? Because if you're not okay with dying, then you're not okay with what is gonna inevitably happen. And so when you're not okay with what is inevitably gonna happen, it's gonna have a lot of influence over you. So you better learn how to get okay with it. And maybe as we get older, we get a little more acceptance of that. I think when you're younger and you do risky things, you're not, I mean, at least for me, some people can go about it and pretend like there's not a possibility, but that's not.
We used to years ago watch Jackass, and I would laugh, and Laird hated it. And he's like, "It's easy to die, try living."
Exactly. No, dying's easy.
It's like
Dying's really
I was
easy.
like, "Oh."
You know how easy it is to die? Just walk outside, and when a car goes by, just jump in front of it. It
So
takes about a
he
less than a second.
he was always offended at, like, people being cavalier because he's like, "That's not hard to die is not that hard.
Yeah,
It's
and and
living."
and and you could look at what we've done, my friends and I, in the big ocean and think that we're being cavalier about it, but in a way, we have the utmost respect for it, and we're showing it through our conduct and our behavior. You know, we do dangerous things every day that we don't even have any that we're not even remotely conscious of. We're hyper vigilant about what we're doing and about what's going on, and I think that changes your relationship with it in a way. And so that's for me, I feel like that's been the part of, as I get older, and that you're not, like Gabby said, you're not out, you don't have to prove anything. You're not like, I got to prove everything and and do this whole thing that you're forced to have when you're young. You need that. That's actually, that's just part of what you do. I think part of the blessings of feeling like you've been run over by a truck as you get older is that you're, hey, good. I don't need to prove anything. Like, I don't need to go out and be like, hey, I got to show you that. How do you do it? And if you do these things, it's really more just for your own personal. I have a saying that, hey, if you see, if a tree falls in the forest, no one sees it. Does it actually fall? And I'm like, it absolutely falls. So, like, like I can go do things and not have people see it and be okay because it brings me a complete fulfillment.
It's been said that in the first half of life, we're performing and maybe pursuing, and the second half of life, we're being present. How does that sound to you? And how are you more present? Clearly, Laird, giving up drinking is a form of adding to your presence. But you're both performance minded, but you seem to be both very present as well. So, how does that relate in your own life?
I think Laird might be a scooch more present than I am. I think I'm a lot of times, like, getting things done in my mind. But I'll be honest with you, I mean, listen, I'm a pretty focused, present person. I'm just comparing myself to him. But I will say that even though I'm in pursuit, but for the sake of pursuit, not for the sake for the creative aspect of pursuit, not for the I need to survive, I wanna prove something to myself or to others, but trying to pursue it in a different way as a creative expression and taking it pretty serious. So I actually feel now that my our youngest daughter just went to college, I've said that I've had my foot on the gas the whole time, but now I'm also taking my foot off the brake. So conversely, I'm looking for a different and interesting kind of expansion.
You're empty nesters,
Open,
Open nester.
open.
open nesters. Okay, so that's the sharing thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They can come back. They're coming back.
Well, and it's not them, it's some other 20-year-old male or a good thing. It's like someone's always around,
Oh,
believe me.
yeah, yeah. Kinda like a runway, it's the planes are landing and taking off. They're always landing and taking off.
You need some air traffic
Well,
controllers.
Here we are.
here we are.
How about your relationship with presence?
Well, first of all, I have 3 women in my life, 4 women in my life. So, if you're not present for the ladies, I mean, I do a lot of waiting. So, and waiting makes you present. Like, if you're waiting, you're present. So, I'm present. I think I've learned to be more still with that. Like, I mean, the ocean just teaches you things that you just and like no, like nothing else can teach you. And in a way, when you're waiting for a wave and you're waiting for a swell and you're waiting for all these elements to come together to create the perfect gem, and it's like, and it could be years. I mean, I think one of the moments of my athletic career was at 35 years old. Like, I literally, and I surfed since I was 5 years old. So that was 30 years of pursuing and believing and then having the thing arrive. And so in a way, I think that training that the ocean has given me, that patience, that, as hard as it is, and sometimes actually Gabby's more she's more concerned for me than I actually am. Like, she's like, "I know I can feel you." I'm like, "No, I'm okay right now. Like, I'm okay. Are you sure you're okay? Like, you shouldn't be okay." But I do I think that has brought me more in the presence. I think just everything going on in the world, just how radical things are sometimes makes me more aware of the moment, the space I'm in, the sun rising, the ocean, all those things. And so in a way, there's a stillness in that, and also my faith in that it will happen too, is that my faith in that it will happen makes me better at waiting. Like, if I know I know it's gonna happen, like, it's gonna happen. It's just, is it tomorrow? Is it next week? Is it next month? Is it in 6 months? It's gonna happen. It will happen. And so kind of having the faith in that and knowing it will helps me wait, because sometimes I think you think it's not gonna happen. And then you're like, then the waiting's impossible. Then it becomes impossible. So I think that kind of belief has led me to be more present and more still. And then a lot of the stuff that we do, I mean, the pool training that we do never is one of the most kind of present bringing places that we have. I mean, I have a friend that's 70 something, comes up this morning, goes, "I come here because it's the only thing that I do and the only training I do that brings me in the present, brings me in the moment. I don't have any distractions. I don't have nothing comes in." And so I think there's some things that we do that help us do that. I know the act of surfing and foiling and the stuff that we do. I mean, it's one of the few places that bring you in the present. Maybe making love might help be one of those too, but I'm just bringing you in the present, like you're in the moment. People talk about riding a wave. There's very few things that I've ever experienced in my life that bring you in the moment like that does. And I think that does help you kind of bridge the gap into other places where you can be in the moment. You start to get better at what you're looking for and knowing what it feels like.
Yeah, we talk about attaining and attuning. There's things you want to attain, but in order to do that, you have to attune. And that's certainly surfing is absolutely that. Last question. Your daughters come to you and say, okay, mom and dad, I want you to come up with a wisdom bumper sticker that actually reflects something you've learned along the way that you want to pass on to us. So like a piece of wisdom that might have an origin story to it with your wisdom fingerprints. What would you say to your daughters?
Well, my first one would be for the bumper. My first, right to the top of my head that just pops directly up, would be, if you want to go slow, get over in the right lane.
It sounds like you're one of those guys that I've seen on the waves who's like, Chip, you are a novice surfer. Get out of the way.
You don't have to worry about that with our girls. They all drive like lunatics like their father.
Okay.
I think for me, the thing I really have hoped to impart on my girls is really to build your life from your inner voice. And that, the idea of, look, because it is more female, but we get caught up into, oh, well, that's working for them, so I should do that. No, you should do the thing that is your path, your purpose, your voice, your mission, your family. Your whole thing comes from you being willing, even when you're scared, to follow the voice inside of you, because it's your life. And you don't want to live someone else's life.
Mm, beautiful. And do you feel like you ever were doing that, Gabby?
Not so much.
Mine's not as deep, but mine, I think mine would be, and I write this down quite often, is anything is possible for the believer.
Yeah. 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 It's certainly a theme for you. That is true.
Laird, Chip, I'll tell you a line that Laird always says to me: "Everything is going to be okay, and it is okay." And I think sometimes if we're going through something, if we just think about that for a second, it's like, oh yeah, you know what? It is okay. And one time I interviewed Robert Waldinger, from the Harvard study. I'm sure you know
Yep.
him.
Yep. Love
And I
him.
asked him,
He's a
I'm
friend.
sure. And I
Yes.
asked him one time, I go, okay, listen, they write books, the Bible, the Tao, like you name it. And they tell you all the secrets to happiness. Like they tell you it's all there. I
Yes.
go, how come we just can't do it? And he goes, oh, Gabby, that's how you get wisdom.
That is a perfect way to end a wisdom podcast. Thank you guys. You're delightful. I look forward to seeing you in person, and
Thanks, Chip.
I just appreciate you being inspirations and role models for all of us.
Chip, thank you. We
Thanks
appreciate you.
so much.
Aloha.
Well, I'm looking forward to hanging out with the two of them because my first lesson is they have an open home. Not only are they open nesters, not empty nesters, but they have an aloha spirit, a sharing point of view, which is that that's what we're here to do, is to share with each other our wisdom, our love, our meals. And so my first lesson here is that the two of them are very open. They're open people. They're open books in terms of who they are. They're open doors in terms of how they welcome people in their life. Secondly, was I think maybe the juxtaposition of breathwork and the conversation there, which they got really into. Let's make sure in the show notes we show Patrick McEwen's book as well as James Nestor's book. I've read James Nestor's book, Breathe. The idea of breathwork is something that we have not really explored here on the Midlife Chrysalis, but it is something that anybody can do. And so it's free. Air is free, breathing is free, and learning how to control your breath and to actually have the ecstatic kind of experience in a holotropic kind of breathwork session is certainly something that we all should consider, and it's good for us as we get older. Juxtapose that with the other point of my second point, which was this idea of dying. Breathwork is living, and at some point Laird talked about dying is easy and living is the hard part. And just knowing that inevitably we're going to die, that memento mori, that sense that we are here temporarily on this planet. I guess as a big wave surfer, someone who's riding 60 and 80-foot waves and are basically each time they go out on those waves, you're taking your life in your own hands. I think that was, to me, he's used dying as a operating system and organizing principle for how you live a great life. And then finally, it was toward the end of the interview, we didn't get into talking about religion or spirituality, but they both did, but Laird in particular started talking about faith and having a devotional practice in the sense that you're going to be out there and trust that that wave is coming. And that metaphor, the idea that you have to have faith and a devotional practice to see that that wave is coming, is true in all of our lives. If we can actually have a belief system that helps us to see that even when we're in the midlife chrysalis and something wrong is happening in our life, that on the other side of this, we're going to be wiser. If you're getting divorced and you don't want to be divorced, on the other side of this, you're probably going to be much more thoughtful and have a better pair of glasses in terms of who the next partner or spouse will be. Being present to actually see the opportunity when it arises. The idea of attaining and attuning. Attaining sometimes requires some attuning. And at the end of the day, he talked about just being a believer. And this reminds me of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and the fact that the people who actually perished most quickly in the concentration camps of World War II were not necessarily the ones who were the most infirmed. They're the ones who had lost a sense of hope and meaning and belief and faith. So just as Ted Lasso says, believe. I hope that that's one of the key things you got out of today's episode, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Midlife Chrysalis. This show is produced by Midlife Media. If you enjoyed this episode, help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite platform.